Dr. Indranil Day is an associate professor in social science and economics at Institute of Rural Management, Anand, India. His area of interest are international economics, political economy, public policy, basic service delivery, housing, and gender. He teaches collective action and cooperation development theory, public policy analysis, applied econometrics. He has completed several research and consulting assignments with international and national issues as well as state and central government of India. He is the editor of International Journal for Rural Management. He has served publications in reputed international and national journals. He has written several opinion articles in national media, including The Print, The Wire, The Telegraph, The Pioneer, Hindu Business Line, and Financial Express. He is also a member of Expert Committee National CSR Awards 2018 and 19, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India.
I would thank National Institute of Hydrology and especially Dr. Goel for giving me the opportunity to discuss some of the very important issues on CSR, particularly CSR pertaining to water and sanitation and hygiene. So in my discussion on CSR, what I would like to cover is the following. Yeah. So the first and foremost thing I'm going to cover about the logic of CSR. So why CSR is important, and that will open us, give us a very brief understanding um, about what should be the what should a CSR project should look like, and whether we are meeting those objectives, or to what extent we are meeting. So that's why this discussion is important. And following that, we're going to talk about the what are the challenges, key challenges and problems and concerns regarding CSR. Why we are talking about CSR, and the way I was just talking that the particular model of CSR. In terms of then, I'm going to talk about the data I have collected till now, and the basis of which I'm going to through the discussion, and that's what I'll discuss in the methodology section. And then next, we're going to talk about some of the descriptive statistics on CSR, CSR expenses, how does it look like, and so on and so forth. Post that, I'm going to talk about two case studies on CSR projects, right? One is on water, another is on sanitation per se. I'm also going to talk about some of the initiatives of CSR initiatives being taken during last 1 year, particularly coronavirus pandemic period. And the learnings from them we're going to collect, and we're going to talk about in the way forward what could be the moving ahead, what we can do in CSR projects. So this is the plan of the presentation. So I'll move forward with the logic of CSR. Now, the strange thing about CSR is that CSR talks about the corporate is a social responsibility. So basically, that comes in your mind is that social expenses, corporate expenses for social purposes. The primary question rises that whether the companies or the private sector should spend on social sector or not. Why they should and why they should not, that's a very debatable issue. Ideally, from a altruistic point of view, everybody should spend on social sector, but there are other ways. If you argue, then they should not be spending. So I'm going to talk about this, but first let's talk about that who is responsible for social sector spending. So regarding this, first I will talk about that there are different types of goods that are available in the society for consumption, right? I'll talk about very broad two categories of goods. One category is called private good, right? What is private good? Private good are goods which are available to you for consumption only when you pay. If you are not able to pay, you would not be part of the consumption, right? You cannot consume that good. And once you pay, then only the seller gets the money in return, and and that will cover the cost of production as well as a little bit of profit. Right. The profit margins can vary, but cost of production and the profit, and that is the seller's incentive to sell you the product, and that is how the products which are private that are produced and sold and consumed. But that does not hold for all other types of goods, right? So there are many goods in this world which we consume, which need to be produced at a certain cost, but need not necessarily that we have to pay always. The classic definition, a classic example for that kind of good is one of these is national defense, right? It requires money to produce national defense. It is quite costly affair, and we all need national defense. Without national defense, we cannot survive. But does not mean that we all pay for national defense. So those who actually do not pay any taxes, suppose, right? They do not pay national defense, right? In certain sense, they actually pay less in national defense in some sense, right? I cannot say they do not pay, because everybody of us are paying indirect taxes, which goes into funding national defense. But those who are not paying income taxes, or those who are consuming less, so in a way they are paying less indirect taxes as well. So as a result, the contribution for them, their contribution for national defense is less. But it doesn't mean that if you contribute less for national defense because you spend less on indirect taxes and you pay less of direct taxes, it doesn't mean that you get less of national defense, right? But that doesn't hold for any private goods like t-shirts or say any other consumption goods. So in a way, there are goods in this world which everybody of us would be able to consume, but need not necessarily that we need to pay. The problem is regarding production of these goods, right? And the whole problem is more acute because these goods are very important goods, right? National defense is important, but not only national defense is important. There are many other goods which are important. There are other certain goods in this category. I mean, comes under say the water, sanitation, and hygiene, right? Why water, sanitation, and hygiene are this kind of good? Because water, sanitation, and hygiene have implication across the board, right, over a lot of people together. So if I drink a contaminated water, or if I make less hygiene or practices, right, then I may get infected by some disease, and this disease can be passed over to someone else. So, in a way, by not maintaining the hygiene standards, or not by not drinking the reasonably good quality of water, I not only infect myself but also infect others. And that is why it's important that it is important to provide or to access the goods, the water sanitation goods up to a certain standard. Otherwise, it will impact a large number of people altogether. And this water sanitation services, water sanitation and hygiene services, right, together is another good, which can be classified as public good, right? Where we need these goods very much. Where these goods needs to be produced at a certain cost, but not necessarily that we always pay for it to access it, right? For example, I give another example. So for example, in my locality, everybody maintains good hygiene standards, right? Everybody dumps their waste, so liquid waste, solid waste in a certain proper way. So that in that manner, I can act. So if everybody does so, I can also get the benefit of better hygiene practices, better sanitation practices. So it's not that I am doing it. Say for example, I'm not. So it's not that I'm only maintaining the good hygiene practices, but just because others are doing maintaining good hygiene practices, I am getting the benefit. And similarly holds when I am maintaining good hygiene practices and others are getting the benefit of it. So this is how this type of goods are public good, and one can say, well, I maintain good hygiene practices, but others do not maintain. So what will happen? Even if I maintain good hygiene practices, then also I may get affected, right? So that is why it requires certain amount of provision of goods which is across the board. You cannot ask that only when you pay you get better water supply and hygiene, right? Because yes, I did not pay because of any reason, because I don't have money. But the point is that my practices regarding water sanitation and hygiene practices, right, that is not going to only impact me but also going to impact others. So in this regard, this is a very important, and this is a public good. Now the point is that companies are private good providers. We are talking that private good providers should be able to provide the public good or not. So in certain sense, for the private good providers, provision of public good is very, very difficult. Why? Because the private providers are private good producers. They are always under competition. They always try to innovate, and they always try to compete with their competitors, and they always try to be at a lower at the cost level, right, so that they can produce the goods at a cheaper rate, sell at a cheaper rate, get larger market, so that nobody takes away their market share. If that is the case, why burden with them the responsibility of providing public good? So that's the major concern, right? And regarding this, but again, there are logics that well, there should be provision of public good by the private, because one reason is that government, which are supposed to provide this public good, as they provide national defense, they should also provide clean water, good sanitation facilities, and so on and so forth. But government also has different problems. They have many things to do, so many things they miss out, or maybe they might be doing it but improperly, right, which we call as failure of omission and commission. That's one problem. Second thing is that government again has many things to do, so they may not give proper importance to certain things which they should be doing. So as a result, very important things gets neglected, right? The third and important thing is that government, so for example, I have a facility, I have created a good drainage system, right? But the point is that until unless these drains are maintained properly, I mean, the system is going to get choked. Now, who is, suppose government has already created the drainage, but who is going to maintain it? Who is going to monitor that whether they are maintained or not? Even the local governments, who are also part of larger governance structure, they may actually fail. The point is that government has problem of monitoring, because their cost of monitoring, managerial cost of monitoring of each and every single area of the country is very, very high. That is what we call transaction cost of monitoring. That may be very, very right. This transaction cost of monitoring, if it is very high, that may lead to failure of provision of public good, particularly water and sanitation services. So in this regard, the question would come that why not other sectors provide? Why not companies provide? Why not privates provide? But again, for the private, the major constraint is that they should be more competitive against their competitors, right? So that they can innovate and produce goods and services at a lesser cost. If they start concentrating on provision of public good, then they would not be able to concentrate on the core thing, that is the producing goods and services at a least cost, and they will lose competitive advantage, right? And so they should not be doing. That's a negative logic that they should not be doing. But again, privates may be interested. There are many other positive things. From the positive side, right? That we can cite. One is that the stakeholders, including the investors, they at times may want the companies to invest in public goods, right? Social and environmental issues. So why they might be interested? There may be various reasons for that. One could be the building of a long-term brand, right? What they call a stakeholder engagement, right? there are idea of stakeholder engagement, that you engage with different stakeholders, right? So that your ultimately long-term business prospect becomes better. So for example, Adani has opened a port in Mundra, and it had certain kind of negative impacts at first, because the port again has impacted the livelihood of the people of particularly the fishermen and also the environment. So they have tried to engage with the stakeholders, that is the fishermen and all that, right? And in various ways to give them opportunity, income earning opportunities, give them what you call as education opportunities, and so on and so forth. So that's what the same stakeholder engagements. As a result, over a period of time, the antagonism of the local community against the port has gone down actually, right? And so that has made their operation much smoother. So that is why even the investors may want to have a engagement with the social responsibility. And in this respect, not only due to that, the investors may actually have a positive outlook on social and environmental issues. That can also be the case, right? So so that's the one and second thing is that some of the, so even if you say that the cost would become higher if the corporates are involved in social activities, but this cost can also be at times passed over to the consumers if the consumers are willing to take it. So at times we may say this is a product which does not involve child labor, so that's why it's possible more. So there could be a niche segment of customers who may be interested to buy even if the product cost high. So the consumers can also take some amount of responsibilities. The other thing I must say is that it's when we talk about the CSR, corporate social responsibility, is where we basically mean that the corporates or the private companies are going to produce the public good. It's not just the investment, the paying for the public good itself. All right. So what it should be the case is that in the process they should be able to innovate in the public good provision. All right. So in some sense that they're going to dovetail their production of private good with the public goods. So for example, if I'm a leather manufacturer company, so well I'm in my CSI initiatives, I'm supposed to spend on the public sector, on the sense of in public good provision, right? I should be more concerned about the safety and security of those people who are engaged in leather tanning and sort of things like that, because we all know in laser tanning a lot of harmful chemicals are used, and also they actually impact the environment. A lot of pollution in many cities, around many cities in India, particularly Ganga also, is due to the pollution by the tanneries. So if I invest some amount of money on the safety security of the employees, and also some amount of investment goes in treatment of the effluents, then probably I contribute to the environment. That could be a CSR issue. So the point is that this should be dovetailed, and as a result, once it gets dovetailed, the transaction cost may actually go down. But in case of government, we are saying the transaction cost is high. In this case, transaction cost would go down. So we should understand from this perspective, the CSR or corporate social responsibility should not be just interpreted as the siphoning of money from the private to the government, right? Or siphoning of the money from private to the social sector. It should also involve some amount of innovation from the private, or you can say some amount of dovetailing of public good with the private good, right? And that is how the innovation in provision and reduction in transaction cost in provision of public good would come. Okay, now yeah, so I have already so now one of the biggest problem of public good provision is as we know is that, as I just explained, is the problem of the people want to get these goods because these are very important goods, right? But the point is that people do not want to pay for it, and that is what we typically call as free riding problem, right? That is, we want to ride on the public good, right? And and the point is that, well, the corporates or the private should spend on the public goods. That's important. But the point is that private would also try to free ride, although they might think that this is also, we must be doing it. There are benefits for the society, but again, the corporates would like to have a good society around, because that is going to help their businesses. But who is going to spend? Whether corporate A is going to spend or corporate B is going to spend. So there would be, everybody is thinking that others would be spending for it. So as a result, spending by corporate may not happen. So the corporate social responsibility, that means the spending for the public good, may not actually happen because of this kind of propensity of free riding, or everybody wants that the other person would do that. So that is why the government of India has thought about making CSR mandatory, and that makes CSR mandatory in India. That comes under the Corporate Companies Act 2013. You can go through the acts. I'm not just playing the brief point of the acts, as that yes, you have been made mandatory, in the sense that not for all, but with certain criteria. That means the corporations, we have companies which have net worth of 500 crore and more, or having turnaround of 1000 crore or more, or having a net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. They are only they only come under this act. Now, what this act says, that whatever your profit you have earned during last 3 financial years, 2% of that should go to the corporate social responsibility. Now, then the question is that, well, I spend 2% on corporate social responsibility for the society, but on what we're going to spend? So for that, government has created a schedule of activities, which we call Schedule 7 of Companies Act, right? So this lists out all the activities. I'll talk about these activities a little later. So, but this is where the activities are. Now, the question is that is it a great step? Yes, in certain sense, it's a great step, because have made certain kind of amendments in law, so that a large part, particularly the wealthier corporates, they cannot free ride on their responsibilities. So that's why it's made responsible. But the point is, the flip side of that is that now, even after making it mandatory, the certain recent study says that on average, only corporates are able to spend 1% of their profits on CSR. Of course, many corporates I know have spent 2% of their profits. It's not that many have not done. Many have done, but on average, it is 1%, and many have not been able to spend 2%. But again, there is another important thing. Earlier, CSR had a kind of a peer pressure. So that is, some big company, I'm not going to name, we all know in India, Tata's have been very famous, very renowned for the CSR activities. So that creates pressure, peer pressure for competitors of Tata's, right? And that's how the CSR used to happen before the act. But with this law in place, these peer pressure motivations have gone down. So some of the recent studies actually say that. So that is actually detrimental for the spirit of CSR and public good provision. Okay, so now regarding this Schedule 7, I just want to cover. So Schedule 7 actually do not have any wash sector as such, but it gives a list of different activities on corporate social responsibility. So it has a particular element on public health. So water supply can come under public health, right? And sanitation is also part of it. And interestingly, it has an element of contribution in Swachh Bharat Code set up by central government. So if you contribute there, then you have already contributed for CSR. So it will be considered as a contribution. Although it goes against the spirit of CSR, because CSR spirit, as I said, is innovation at the ground level by the companies and monitoring them. But that would not happen. But this is still a contribution. And yeah, in terms of hygiene practices, promotion of health, including preventive healthcare, these are part of CSR. So another things that comes under CSR is slum development initiative, all the whole wash sector, water sanitation sector, that comes under also slum development activity. So that also can come under CSR. And disaster management, so even the COVID-19 crisis, so many expenses of the COVID-19 crisis can come under CSR. And companies, I'll talk about well, distributing masks and all sort of things, right? So those also can be covered. So, and the point is that the government recently in CSR activities has said that it will they will very liberally interpret CSR. So in that way, in terms of COVID expenses, if you spend on COVID, any matter, so government also takes it very liberally. Now, what are the concerns? A lot of things as what are the concerns? Concerns are that what we just talked about, that whether you are making a lot of investment on companies that started making investment on CSR. The question is that whether these initiatives are sustainable. In saying what does the sustainability mean over here? Here we mean by sustainability, we mean that not particularly from environmental point of view. By sustainability, we mean particularly from a financial sustainability point of view. In certain sense that yes, I'm not spending on CSR. Some CSR activities is going on, public good is being provided. But if I withdraw it tomorrow, so for certain reason I may withdraw. Maybe that I become a loss-making organization. In that case, of course, I will withdraw my CSR activities, right? So in that case, would the public good provision stop suddenly? So that will going to impact detrimental impact on the community, or in other, so that would not make have a detrimental effect if the community had already built capacity to sustain those public good provision. But would the CSR initiatives by the companies have already had them already developed capacity within the community? So that's a question. We don't know that, and probably the answer is not. It's not always that. These are the things, whether the companies are innovating or they are just spending money. So see, the spending money for government funds and considering those contribution as CSR is against the spirit of space. Even when in the 2013 Act, Prime Minister's National Relief Fund was brought under CSR, right? But it was some of the government, some of the government high-level committees they actually say that this should not be done, because that again goes against the spirit of CSR. Similarly, PM CARES funds during the COVID crisis, that has also brought under CSR. Now, although we understand this is an unusual situation, but still that goes against the whole concept of CSR, that companies should innovate at the local level. They should maintain, they should build capacity. That may not happen if you just spend money on government funds and get the certificate that you got a CSR spend. So these are the concerns. We'll explore these concerns with a little bit of more data. So what we have done is that we have taken some data, and of course the spread of data is not very high, and some of the data are confidential to the company. So accessing data is very difficult. We have some aggregative data from Ministry of Corporate Affairs and some other data compiled by different other organizations, for example, FICCI and some NGO bodies. And this is what in terms of data I'll consider, and then I'll talk about the two different case studies, right? And of Western Coalfield Limited and one of ONGC, right? Regarding CSR spend, if you look at most of the CSR spend is being spent on education, which is important. I'm not saying it's not important. 17% on healthcare. Now, this is a very fuzzy area. Healthcare as such not only is direct medication, but also at times preventive healthcare, right? So it's a matter of interpretation. What are the things included in the healthcare sector? But there are certain spending which are devoted to explicitly wash sector. So one is sanitation, which constitutes 2% only of the total CSR expenses, and then 1% on safe drinking water, 1% on Swachh Bharat course. So this is in total you can say dedicated is 5 to 6%, maybe, or maybe a little more if you take into account the healthcare sector, but it should not be very high. So that's the domain we are talking about. But this domain is very important because this is part of the preventive healthcare of the country, and healthcare is very a basic part that leads to productivity. So that's why it's important. Now, looking into the CSR expenses over a period of time, we can find the overall CSR expenses has increased, although in between 2015 and 18 there has been certain, it has plateaued to some extent, but it has again increased. And if you talk about CSR wash expenses, these are very less as compared to the other expenses which I just already explained. And if you look into the wash sector of say in terms of CSR expenses, there is some ups and downs, but again it is the whole mood is on the rising side and during last 1 year. I mean 2017 to 19, whatever data is available to us, so it's in a positive side. Although in terms of Swachh Bharat post contribution, it has little bit gone down during last year. I mean 17 to 9 17 18 to 18 19 period, but other sectors are increasing. So I mean it is not very stable, but it's not also very bad. In some way, the overall trend of expenses or of CSR as well as in the expenses of CSR in wash sector is concerned. Now, I have made a little bit of comparison to see that to what extent the expenses made in CSR on water and wash sector and the expenses made in government by the government in different development projects. If I juxtapose how they looked at, what is the objective to understand? The objective is to understand that whether government's omissions and commissions are being fulfilled, or you can say being plugged in by the CSR expenses, the gaps being created by government, whether these are plugged by CSR expenses. So what we find that government expenses in medical, public health, water, sanitation, in that sector, the government has spent 10% of the total revenue expenses. Revenue and capital expenses. On the other hand, in case of CSR expenses, if I just add up healthcare, drinking water, I'm just taking all the healthcare expenses, so that's why the number has gone up. Healthcare, drinking water, and sanitation, it constitutes 21%. So in certain sense, as I said, healthcare and water sanitation are very integrated things, whereas government has spent less, CSR has spent more. So in that way, you can say CSR is fulfilling its purpose in the sense that plugging some of the gaps of expenses that government has created. Now let us look at the nature of the expenses. If you look at the nature of the expenses, many companies have spent a lot of money on CSR. So we have found that 10 companies have spent more than 50 crore each in CSR in healthcare and wash projects, right, all together. So that's quite some expenses. So some companies are actually concentrating on it. Although most of the companies have spent more on education, but some have actually spent a lot on wash sector. So that's one. And many companies have spent a lot on Swachh Bharat posts, right? You can find out. And all these are very renowned companies, and many of these are PSUs, although there are many private entities as well. Swachh Bharat post contribution is quite high from that. And in terms of industry-wise classification, we find that most of these expenses on wash has been from heavy engineering and manufacturing sector, right? And the reason could be that these companies, heavy engineering and manufacturing, they impact the water sector most. Probably that could be the reason that the expenses for watts or the projects in the water sector is higher from their side. So that's one. But what is concerning, which I'll spend some amount of time, is that if you look at the division of expenses, see, most of the expenses are made on construction of toilet, drinking water provision, water storage, or in a certain way in construction activities. And of course, the higher expenses would be on hardware. There is no doubt, because those are construction activities. But the expenses on behavioral change initiatives, awareness creation, are very less. what, of course there will be lesser, but it is much less probably than we probably expect. And why this is the other part is very important, the software part or the behavioral change part, because the behavioral change part is actually a more important public good than probably construction of toilet. Because if you bring behavioral change, then the people on their own would be able to construct toilet, or on their own would demand better water supply services from the local government, if you are able to generate the awareness for better water supply services. So if you look at the publicness of the expenses, these software part is more important, but unfortunately you see the expenses are much less, or in terms of software tools, right? So and that's one of the major concerns. Now we will go to the case studies. First I'll talk about the water supply project by Western Coalfields Limited. What they have done, so as it deals with coalfield, so they pollute water a lot, and that creates a drinking water problem in in the area where they operate. And not only drinking water, a problem of water for irrigation. So what Western Coalfields, what they've done, they have tried to recover the mine discharge water, and then treat the water scientifically, test the water, and then discharge and the water for drinking water as well as irrigation. So it has covered many villages, 43 villages, and you can see the number of beneficiaries as they claim are quite high. Now, so what is this? This project has, if you has a water purification plant, right? And this plant is very sophisticated. It has permanent employees to test the water on regular basis, and and the all sophisticated instruments are there. So what I try to mean is that expenses for this project are actually very high. All right. And in terms of water provision, they almost give water free, right? And although in some of the rural areas around these villages, the SHGs take water at a very low cost and they sell them, but I mean the expenses they recover from those sales are very less. Although they have plans that they will develop bottled water plant, right, and will name it as Colney, but that's yet to begin. So that's not started yet. So from the whole system, they have RO plant and all these things are there. It's very capital intensive, and as well as its O&M cost, operation maintenance cost is very high. So if you look at from the sustainability point of view, financial sustainability, I'm maybe talking about, it's not that. So that's one aspect. Second thing is, had it been able to develop communities' capacity to maintain this project in future if they withdraw? The answer is no. Community has nothing to do with this. They just are recipients of better quality of water. They have done a wonderful job, but the point is that in the process, the community has developed no capacity, even in the future, to take care of some of these responsibilities. So yeah, so in terms of replicability, also due to high cost and resource and technicity, may not be also a kind of replicable project as such. So these are the important things about this. So I mean, about this project, and that's the flip side. As I said, that you are spending, of course, but the point is that not developing community's capacity. Similarly, we have looked into the toilet projects, some of the individual toilet projects by ONGC, and they have also done a wonderful job. They have covered many villages in Dahod district in Gujarat, right? And they have also, but the one good thing about them is that they have also concentrated on IEC, information education campaign. But I will try to highlight one more important thing. So people think about individual house and toilet construction, just construction of toilet. But ONGC's project has not only considered the toilet construction, but also a water tank and wash machine with the toilet. That's the whole project. And this is very important, because until unless you make provision for water, particularly in Dahod district, you would not be able to make people use the toilet, because our basic objective as a public good provider is to change the behavior. Behavioral change is not going to come by if you if you do not make provision for water. And I have studied in Dahod district extensively on Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and all that. We have found that yes, toilet has been constructed, but people have not used the toilet. Or people may be using the toilet for something else, even as a storage. Why? Because there is no provision of water. So this flaw in the model has been rectified by ONGC. So in that way, it is great. And also, they have done some amount of information education campaign. It's very difficult to judge right now the how much community has built the capacity to sustain this, but at least we can say that there has been a attempt to give a holistic solution to some extent. In why holistic? Because you have given water along with toilet and some amount of initiatives in terms of behavioral change as well. So in case of wash and during the COVID-19 also, in terms of hygiene practices, the companies have made different initiatives. Of course, government, as I said, has made it kind of liberal to spend on COVID-related issues, and they will consider these as CSR expenses. Many companies have spent on PM Cares Fund. As I said, although this may not be in line with what we think one should be doing. And but again, many companies have distributed masks and PPE kits in terms of hygiene practices. Also, many companies have actually trained the people or sensitized the people how to behave in the an appropriate way. So I don't know what's the impact. It doesn't look that it has impacted a lot, but at least companies have tried to do that. And these all contributions are considered as CSR contributions. These are valuable contributions during COVID times, and these are much better probably than just spending money on in PM cares, because these have kind of community engagement, developing capacity within the community, right, and innovation at the lower level. So the way forward, if I talk about, yes, we should develop sustainable water and sanitation models. By way sustainable, I basically mean the financial sustainability point of view. So IEC models are very, very important. We should have more IEC. And we need to think about the economy of sanitation, right? And the circular economy of sanitation, particularly if we talk about, right? I just touch upon it, and in the sense that we should be able to have models where revenue generation is possible, and where community capacity can be developed through IEC expenses, right? Information, education, and communication expenses, right? And communities should be able to develop their capacity, and the company should be able to innovate at the lower level, right? So these are the important things. And the model should project that, well, I'm just not spending on government programs, so I'm just innovating at the local level. So ONGC's initiatives in terms of provision of water supply is in you can say in that direction. All right. So the other thing is that toilet economy. So one important things we have found in Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and all that is that one kind of toilet being rolled out everywhere. So single pit toilet and so on. Sorry, it's a double pit toilet, but there are issues regarding construction of toilet, right, and the quality of that. So the point is that instead of taking one size fits all, we should have different range of toilets, right? And people with the same amount of say subsidy from the government or maybe the corporate sector, we can have a kind of a range of toilet products, right? So there could be different types of pits we can create, and that can be rolled out. So some companies have already tried to do that, and they have rolled out these things in different other areas. So that should be the object. Just spend that doing a kind of spending money on a single model of toilet is not fine. Should have a different varieties of toilet. This thing toilet. Um, Given on behavioral change. Once you make people start thinking that, well, we should have a better toilet, we should have a toilet which we should use then probably people would, of course, go for a better or different kind of models as per their needs. The circular economy of sanitation should also be taken into account, which is not there. So companies have not innovated. So how to use waste, different type of waste in terms, even in fecal waste, in generating different type of energies. So particularly different gases, biogases, and so on and so forth. So they and biofertilizers. So actually, the model is not there for that, but companies should have worked for that, and there is a huge potential of that how we can have produce alternative energies, as well as the fertilizers, biofertilizers, through the alternative economy model, sanitation model. And there are already sanitations sellers and buyers all together, right? Um, there is another kind of initiative. So there are different companies have already rolled out in different countries. Not that the circular economy is just talking about. So some initiatives are there, but we should think in this direction, at least in terms of CSR, right? And then we should also there's another concept which is coming up, which is very important, and that is generating data out of sanitation, right? And what is that? So why is this important? It is important not only, suppose the companies have created toilets, but whether these toilets are getting maintained, whether these toilets are getting used, what is the use of this toilet, whether behavioral change has taken place in or not. These are very important things to track. So for that, data analytics strategy, data analytics services should be available, and there are many companies who are interested about this data, because if I look into the largest sanitation economy, then many companies would be trying to get would be willing to get access to this data, and there is an economy for that data. So this can also be explored, and this will not only help the companies, but also help in public health services provision. So from that perspective, we should do. And Tata Trust has already taken some initiatives. They have this Zila Swachh Bharat products have been sent in all across India for Swachh Bharat vision, and Pune Municipal Corporation has been taken as a kind of initiative for making it a smart sanitation economy, and to some extent they have been successful. But I'm not saying this can be done altogether very suddenly, but the companies in terms of CSR should think in these lines, just rather than just spending money on some government projects or government outlets. Okay, so, and last and not the thing that I just want to say, one important concept we always remember, that when we talk about CSR, or when we talk about any sort of public good provision, even by the state or central government, it should be it should be worked out with the community, and that is what we call at the concept of co-production and co-management. Co-production means that the communities have to pay some amount of money, and that is how the communities, the accountability lines can get generated. That as if I'm paying the money, that means I'm feeling that it is important for me, right? If I do not feel it important, then there should be initiatives too for behavioral change or IEC campaigns, not just develop some infrastructure. So that's why it's important. But again, just giving all the responsibility of expenses to citizens is not the only solution. You should give some responsibility of management. Also listen to them, that what they want, what kind of things are required in the local context. So knowledge partnership is also required in this regard, which we call the concept of co-management. This concept of co-production, co-management, which were earlier talked about in government service provision, should be taken into account in the CSR initiatives. Then only CSR projects can be able to deliver the services in terms of innovations at the local level, as well as reducing the transaction cost. And hope that the CSR of the companies, CSR ideas of the companies will move in this direction in the future. And that's what we can think about, right? And although we can say the overall CSR journey, particularly from 2013 onwards, has been wonderful, but there are gaps are not actually right now on regarding spending the money, because government has already made it that spending is necessary, and the companies are spending. what is important for now is that companies to take more responsibilities. We have found that the companies should have a CSR board, right, and a CSR committee, and they should recommend to the board. Many of the cases, these committees or board are for the namesake, right, and they should take more responsibilities. Right. Instead of these committees giving this responsibility to others, they should take more responsibility, and they should also partner with local NGOs. Right. And many companies are doing. It's not that they are not doing. And the point is, even in these cases, we have found that the people, the companies, even the NGOs and companies together, they are not innovating. They're just replicating some standard models in every place. We should stop doing that, right? And we should think about more in terms of co-production and co-management, when knowledge partnership should be there. We should understand what is the real need of different areas. It not only applies for wash sector, but any sector of CSR expertise. So with this, I will stop my. I think I've already shooted out the time, so not very much, but I'll stop. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speaking, and hope we can take these ideas forward. So thank you so much.